Hello, good morning. It's Friday, June 14th. Luckily, not the 13th. I was laying in bed, staring into the ceiling, when my phone buzzed. Oh, who is that? I wondered. It's not a who, it's a what. It's a notification about the chaos of the French Assembly elections, and the information being dished out appears to taste better than my usual breakfast. There's a lot of things going on in France right now as they're preparing for the Summer Olympics. But now, ever since Macron dissolved the assembly and announced snap elections, things seem to be moving at a much faster pace in the country. The various parties are organizing themselves both internally and in groups, like some of the progressive parties plan on doing. Others, like similarly minded Reconquête and National Front parties, are so far choosing not to follow suit and working separately. However, the attention has shifted when the Republicans Party showed that they aren't willing to cooperate with someone in particular, their own president. This is Éric Ciotti. This gentleman has been the leader of the Republicans since late 2022, and he was unanimously removed from that position this week, all of a sudden. Or has he? It's confusing. On Wednesday, June 12th, Ciotti declared on social media that he wants to work with the National Front. That didn't fly with the rest of the Republicans, so they ousted him unanimously. The president said that he cannot be ousted because it contradicts the values and the policies of the Republican Party. So he locks himself up in the party's headquarters. Right after that, the party's Twitter account gets suspended for breaking community guidelines. God knows what that means nowadays, but later gets reinstated. The next day, a tweet is posted confirming that Éric Ciotti is still president of the Republicans, but hours later, that tweet is deleted. Ciotti is seen leaving the headquarters and claims that he's going to a meeting with Jordan Bardella, the leader of the National Front. And that's the last update that I could find. What on earth happened here? So much has happened in less than a week, and the elections will only end in July 7th. My goodness, you can't measure the amount of chaos because it would break the charts. Like the story of the five-star movement gentleman fighting in the Italian Senate is tame in comparison to whatever this is. I was ready to focus on the British elections. Now the European elections are over-ish, because there's most definitely, I would say 99.9% chance of a 180-degree change of government over 14 years of conservative leadership. But then the French just barge in with a buffet of sensationalist politics. Gosh, who needs reality shows when you have these fools begging for attention? Hungary is fined 200 million euros for breaking EU asylum law. Reading from Politico, the European Court of Justice on Thursday fined Hungary 200 million euros for breaking the EU's asylum laws and ignoring an earlier judgment. The Luxembourg court first ruled in December 2020 that Hungary had failed to comply with the bloc's rules on the treatment of migrants by, quote, unlawfully detaining, unquote, asylum seekers and deporting them before they could appeal the rejection on their applications, ordering Budapest to make changes to its policies. Hungary ignored the judgment, which the ECJ described in a statement on Thursday as, quote, deliberately evading the application of the EU common policy, end quote. Along with the 200 million euros fine, Hungary will be fined an additional 1 million euros per day that it fails to comply with the court's judgment. If Budapest refuses to pay the fines, they can be deducted from its share of the EU budget, as was the case with Poland. Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban lashed out at Thursday's judgment, calling it outrageous and unacceptable in a post on Twitter. It seems that illegal migrants are more important to the Brussels bureaucrats than their own European citizens, he added. Well, I'm not a fan of Orban. Surprise, surprise. Who would have thought? I'm not a fan of this EU asylum law either, to be honest. But that's not what I want to talk with you about. In my opinion, I think that the European Union is going too soft on Hungary and like minded countries. Bless them. They also can't do much, can they? It's funny that Orban and his supporters claim that Brussels is a dictatorship or something. Dictatorship, they're not. But if I were in charge, I would show them. I would turn on Budapest with the following proposal. If you wish to remain in the European Union and milk the teat of its benefits, you must reverse the national laws that contradict our regulations and laws within 6 months. Actually, scratch that. Make it 3. Because Fidesz has majority in parliament, do they not? Otherwise, we will sanction you, your friends, your friends' companies, and any EU business that would have trade relations with you, your friends, and your friends' companies. Iran news would take a hit. That's a bummer. But sacrifices need to be made. The downside of that idea is that it would drive them closer to the Kremlin, so perhaps not the best idea I've had. But also, I don't see this easygoing diplomacy working. It's not going that far. Cutting EU funds for Hungary is not working. These fines aren't working either. And the EU doesn't have enough strong mechanisms because we didn't know that we would ever arrive to this point where we have misbehaving members in our midst. Germany's defense minister presented a proposal on Wednesday for a selective military service focused on volunteers to boost its depleted armed forces in the face of tensions with Russia, following widespread opposition to a return to conscription. Around 13 years after Germany suspended mass conscription, Defense Minister Boris Pistorius said on Wednesday all men would be obliged to fill out a questionnaire to gauge their suitability for and interest in military service upon turning 18. The questionnaire would be optional for women. The minister has vowed to turn Germany into a war-ready nation, warning that war between NATO Western Defense Alliance and Russia could happen in 5 to 8 years. Well, I am in favor of military conscriptions as part of a hope for the best, prepare for the worst kind of strategy, so I believe this is a good step forward in the right direction by Germany. Portuguese Prime Minister Luís Montenegro has done the right thing in clarifying the government's support for former Socialist Prime Minister António Costa's possible candidacy for the presidency of the European Council, said President Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa, citing the outcome of the European elections as grounds. End quote. My first thought on this is that they're trying to get rid of him. He's been investigated in a corruption probe. He claims to be innocent. There was a mistaken identity that involved him, and he's being investigated in a corruption probe. I don't have this in my script, so I'll have to go. I'll have to go improv. He was, from what I remember, he was still prime minister, right? And the corruption probe started. There was some sort of bribery and conflict of interest, something like that. Maybe they both. I don't exactly remember the details. He was being accused by the authorities of being involved, but and then he resigned. But after he resigned, it was claimed by civil authorities that it was a case of mistaken identity. But he's still being investigated in that corruption probe. Ever since he resigned, he's been rumored as a hot contender for the European Council leadership seat. Now to another big story. Charles Michel plots revenge against Ursula von der Leyen. European Council President conspires to secure next top job and thwart his presidential enemy from getting a second term. From Politico. 8 EU diplomats, officials, and national government officials told Politico they fear Michel is out to get von der Leyen at the tail end of their dwelling presidencies and years-long rivalry by attempting to thwart a potential second term for the Commission chief. It's driving everyone crazy because his game is so obvious, making von der Leyen stumble and dreaming of his own top job, said one EU official. The official, like others quoted in this piece, was granted anonymity to speak candidly about two of the EU's most well-known figures. In the past few weeks, some European countries have become increasingly nervous about Michel's real agenda. Many member states are concerned that Charles Michel won't play a constructive role, but rather pursue a personal revenge agenda. One EU diplomat said, capturing the mood among many of their colleagues. Since taking on the job in 2019, von der Leyen's reputation as crisis manager-in-chief has risen during the pandemic and Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, while Michel has been the subject of grumbling, criticism, and ridicule. Furthermore, his whiplash decision to leave his job early to run as a candidate for the European Parliament before quickly backtracking only increased annoyance across the bloc with the Belgian Liberal. He sees the comparison with von der Leyen as fundamentally false and unfair, said another EU diplomat. It looks very real to me. Von der Leyen's team declined to comment. Once Michel's term ends on December 1st, it cannot be renewed because it's the second term, and the former Belgian Prime Minister has no obvious exit strategy. So why not gun for another prestigious EU-level role? The article goes on to say that this rivalry might not end well for Michel because he, unlike von der Leyen, doesn't have much of a shot. Remember when I mentioned a couple of minutes ago that Antonio Costa is being prompted as the next president of the European Council by the media? Well, there is another current prime minister who is constantly being brought up in Brussels circles as well, and that is Kaja Kallas, the Liberal Estonian PM. She's going through a difficult time at the moment. Let's check what Euractiv has to say. Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas has been involved in controversy after a senior defense minister official resigned in protest at the Estonian government's inaction on the arms budget, which Kallas claims to have found out about through the press. Ugh. We have read this in the press. We have asked both Kushti Salm and Martin Herem about what we have read in the press, and the finance minister has sat down and made a plan, the prime minister said. These accusations are exaggerated, and I don't understand why they are being made. We haven't been able to have a debate to ask the same questions, Kallas added. Kallas' popularity has plummeted due to budget cuts in the public sector and the widespread feeling among the population that she is more focused on a possible future position in NATO or the EU than on domestic policy. Meanwhile, Kala's name has been among the most discussed to replace Spain's Josep Borrell at the helm of the European External Action Service, backed by French President Emmanuel Macron, Politico reported on Saturday. However, the Prime Minister told Estonian broadcaster ETV that journalists were speculating about Macron's support. Interesting. So they're not speculating on the other stuff, the other rumors that we're hearing, the psh, 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 are they? Since Russia's full-scale invasion, Kalash gained a lot of popularity, and many of us watching her were impressed and inspired by her leadership. As any ambitious person in her position who sees that things aren't working out the way she wants domestically, she'll browse for the next chapter where she gets to keep her international influence minus the domestic issues. Mark Rutte, the outgoing Dutch Prime Minister, is another person who's doing that. After 13 years in office, he simply resigned after a clash amongst a coalition because of migration policy, apologize, and he's now the top runner for NATO General Secretary. There's, I believe, only three member states of NATO that are opposed to him, Hungary being one of them, which is classic. Uh, well, it's how politics works. What can I say? Thank you for watching. I'll see you on the next one.